Hi everyone. So I've been watching Kat Black's videos. If you guys don't know who Kat Black is, she is this totally cool black trans woman who posts videos about feminism, social justice issues, things like that on YouTube. And the thing that I really, really like about her is that she is so inclusive. She is so about like intersectionality, while at the same time remaining completely bullshit free. Like she will not accept bullshit from anyone, and she will call you out. Like she will throw your name in the mud in front of everyone, and you will deserve it, and you will love it, because there are a lot of people in this world who are like flat out wrong and that need to be called out for it, and she does it. And she does it in a way that I think is necessary. It's like necessarily mean. I don't know if that's the right word. It's more strict, really. Because we need to come from a place, I think, that is no longer accepting of the way that certain people are being treated, or if you are part of the communities that we talk about when we talk about social justice issues, ways that you should not be treated anymore. It's 2015. Everyone has heard about social justice. Even if you don't understand it completely, it's there. All you have to do is just reach out. So I'm without patience anymore. And I think Kat Black is without patience anymore, and I love her for that. So much of what she says is just like so right on. And I think it's because she represents a part of the community that I think is such a great example of like the necessity of intersectionality within feminism, within activism. She is so many different parts of the community just within one human being. She's black, but she's also a woman, but she's also trans. So I think that just shows that you can't come at social justice issues with this like kind of one-sided mindset. You can't come at it thinking, well, I'm only going to support women, or I'm only going to support trans people, or I'm only going to support black people, because the issues interconnect and they overlap, because for a lot of people, they aren't just black, or they aren't just woman, or they aren't just, gay. A lot of people are black and trans, or black, trans, and gay, or, black, woman, and gay, and the issues there are sometimes the same, but also warp or become more complicated depending on, how many other facets of yourself are being actively oppressed by the community at large. So she's just a very good example of that. She's a very good example of like why we need to listen to people who actually have these real experiences, because they're out there. It's not just like a myth, like there's so many different types of people in this world, and they all have very real stories that we need to listen to, so that way we know how to support them, and how to be there for them. So yeah, definitely check her out. She's very, very cool. But the point of this video, other than to just like stand over Kat Black, is to talk about coming out, because in one of Kat Black's videos, she kind of documents her transition on YouTube, because she's been on it since it first started, and so incidentally, she's kind of documented this transitional period in her life, and something about it got me thinking about coming out. I think because, at least in the first few segments of this video, each segment kind of began similarly, where it was almost like this new person in her life discovered or found out about her identification as trans. And it reminded me of how prevalent that is in probably most people's lives in regards to if they are part of the LGBTQIA community. Coming out is not just it's not just one moment in a person's life. I don't think it's something that continues on. It's a recurring moment in the lives of people who are a part of this community. And so I wanted to talk about that, but also sort of shed some light on like why coming out is like such a big deal, because I think a lot of the reasons are not quite as obvious to people who don't have to experience it and who will never experience it. So without further ado, I'm just gonna like get right into it and talk about. First of all, I actually just want to point out that, you know, I was inspired by Kat Black's video, but my coming out experience is not at all going to be the same experience that she had. Part of this is just because, you know, we're individuals and so we experience things differently. But another part is just that, you know, she's trans and I'm gay. And while we're a part of the same community, these are two very different issues and two very different identities. And because of that, we're going to experience things differently. We're going to experience oppression differently. We're going to experience coming out differently. It's just going to be an all-around different experience. So I'm not making this video to compare my experience to hers or to say that they're at all the same, because they might be equally important issues, you know, coming out as a gay person or coming out as a trans person, but they're going to have their unique issues that are going to make yeah, I don't know where the sentence was going, but they're just going to be different. Like, you're going to have to open yourself up to the possibilities of the differences within those two different situations. That way you know how to, you know, combat the ignorance that trans people are confronted by, and the separate ignorance that gay people are confronted by, if that makes sense. So, yeah, without further ado, I'm just going to kind of get into it. I'll talk to you guys about a little bit about my coming out experience, which is like continuing, really. And then I'll kind of relay off into some other stuff associated with that. But I came out to my friends and, or to my school, really, in 12th grade. And the reason why, if you guys are interested, is because the year before there was this guy who had like a huge crush on me. And I ended up having a crush on him too, but I think it was just because I was self-absorbed and I was like, oh cool, someone likes me. I'm gonna like him too, because how nice. But yeah, he really liked me, and I ignored him, and acted like I didn't like him, and like I was straight, which is a difficult thing for me to pretend to be, honestly. But like he asked me to prom and things like that, and I was like, no, and then I would like I would still like flirt with him and stuff like that, so I think he kind of knew. But then finally he was just like, you know, I don't like you anymore, which was like a total lie. And like that summer I guess that kind of pressured me into it, and I was like, you know, never mind, like, why don't we just go out on a date? And I think I pretended like I was like dared to do it. I sort of like dude, just like totally dare me to, like, you should just dare me to date you. Like, wouldn't that be cool? Just dare me to date you, right? Just dare me to date you. As if it wasn't like even my idea, but it was my idea, and like we made plans to go on a date, but I'm a crazy person and I freaked out, and yeah. So after that experience, I was like, I don't want that to happen again. Like, I want, if I'm gonna fall in love with someone, or fall in like with someone, like I want to express it and not be scared to do that. And so I did that in 12th grade. I actually made a Tumblr post, which is like so embarrassing now, but I made a Tumblr post and immediately deleted it, but like everyone had already seen it, fortunately, and they were just like, congratulations, which is a weird response, first of all, to someone coming out, but yeah. And so everyone kind of knew, and it's good on one hand because it is a freeing thing. But on the other hand, there are some complicated issues involved with it. One, labels are really tricky. And in a lot of ways, I don't really feel comfortable identifying as gay. But sometimes, I mean, I tend to just use that term because I think people are more familiar with it. They can sort of grasp it in their minds a little bit better, as opposed to like maybe some other things like I'm sometimes I identify it as queer, but that has its own implications. People still consider that to be derogatory, but it depends on like where you're coming from. But yeah, with labels, like labels are a really tricky thing. And like after I came out as being gay in 12th grade, I then immediately started to have a crush on my girlfriend, um, which was like totally confusing. And then everyone was like, because it was so obvious, like the way that we interacted with each other was so like obviously something more than friends, and everyone was like so confused, because like I literally I just came out as being gay. And I felt weird about like backtracking on it. I was like, well, I already said it. Am I really gonna go through with this relationship? And then I was confused about like, am I really attracted to her, or is this just like a fluke? And am I gonna get over it? In which case, is she going to kind of be left in the dust? And that's not really fair to her. And blah blah blah. All these like different thoughts in my head. Um, so yeah, I kind of wish that I had known of other labels at the time to maybe use, but even then I kind of like feel like coming out is like this weird thing that forces you to label yourself, whereas I don't think straight people really think about it. Like I don't think straight people really think about labeling themselves. They just are. But when you are someone who's a part of the LGBT community, you kind of become really reflective, and you become really internal, and you really start like questioning like every aspect of yourself, which I don't think is necessarily really fair. Like I don't really feel like I should be pressured into identifying myself to other people who don't really have any bearing on my life. Um, I feel like I should really just be able to date like whoever the fuck I want without having to, justify it to anyone else or to label it to anyone else. Um, One, because once again, straight people don't have to do that. Straight people don't have to constantly justify themselves or reinforce themselves. But also, I think it's really difficult to put an entire human being's sexuality into a box. I think sexuality is much more complex and intricate than that. Um, so yeah. And then, when I came out, I had some very different, I guess, responses to it. I think you have like 3 possible negative responses from people. And I, of course, had some pretty positive responses too. Some of my best friends, like they were pretty supportive. They still say problematic things because it is a learning curve, I think, for a lot of people. But those things that we can work through. But for other people who weren't necessarily like my closest friends, I did get some really strange reactions. And like I said, I think that there are like 3 main negative reactions that you can possibly have when you come out to people. One of them is generally done by girls, which is they immediately ask you to like go shopping with them, and like, oh my god, wouldn't it be great if we were like totally besties? Because like somehow your sexuality changes like who you are and your interests and things like that, to where you like immediately become a stereotype and devote your life only to straight girls who just have like dire shopping needs at that point in time. So yeah, my issue with that is just that it's like really dehumanizing and objectifying, actually. And I think it's just really telling that not once did they act that way towards me like before I came out. So it's definitely like a shift in their opinion on like who I am. Um, it's like I shed a few layers of my humanity, and become, like cardstock for them to, like decorate however way they want. Men tend to act a little bit differently. Like what I'm trying to get at here with these 2 things, which I hope you'll see in a second, is that these are what I think people who do these things consider to be positive reactions to coming out, when they're actually like really negative. And rude and just really problematic. So you got what girls typically do, which is, they want that stereotypical gay best friend. But a lot of guys have this, like, almost like they're overcompensating in a lot of ways. A really good example of this actually happened recently, like last night recently. I went out with my friend who has been dating this guy who, like, just between us is, like, probably not the best. But anyway, so I went out with her and I met him for the first time. And he knows I'm gay. So I didn't necessarily have to come out to him, but he knows. And it changes his perspective on who I am, or who he might have thought I was before if he had never known that I was gay. If he had just met me first thing without any previous knowledge, like, he probably would have reacted to me completely differently. But he, and I, it was really strange because I had talked to my friend before, and I know that he's actually really homophobic. And so I was really surprised with, like, how he reacted to me. I was wearing, like, this hot pink shirt that had roses on it. And I wish I had it, I would show you. And, like, total booty shorts. And just was, like, totally flagrantly gay that entire day. And the way that he, like, spoke to me, it was like he completely shifted his opinion around me. Like, one moment he was talking to me about how, like, they legalized gay marriage, and he was like, but it was like it hadn't even come up in conversation. He was just, like, looking at me, and suddenly he was just like, it's, like, really great that they legalized gay marriage in the United States, isn't it? Like, and then, like, he pulled out, like, all of the stupid, like, phrases like, like, love is love, and why does it even matter? Like, people should just get over it and stuff like that. But it was, like, out of context. Like, it wasn't a natural response to, like, the conversation that we were having at that point in time. So it was just very blatant. And another moment, we were talking about, like, how tight my pants were, which, like, okay, they were pretty tight, but typically people don't just, like, talk about that. Like, there's this, like, weird thing that happens, I think, to gay people, and maybe to people of other sexualities, where they really do become objectified. Like, people feel like they can talk about their bodies and, like, how they have sex, and they feel like they can manipulate them in a way. Like, girls feel like they can manipulate them into being, like, like, their gay best friend who goes shopping with them and stuff like that, like their dolls or something like that, which is, like, weird, and I haven't totally thought about that enough to, like, understand why that happens. In some ways, it's similar, I think, to, like, what happens to women. Like, women are objectified in our society, and maybe people feel like they can do that to gay men too, because people feel like gay men are just, like, like, naturally effeminate. I don't know. But anyway, to get back to what I was talking about, we were talking about, like, how tight my pants were. And I specifically remember him, like, making this motion, presumably talking about my butt. And he was like, so, like, why do you do that? Like, why do you wear tight pants? Is it, like a mating call? And, like, I didn't even answer him. I was just, like, thinking in my head, I was like, a mating call, like we're some kind of animal or something. Yeah, because, like, okay, first of all, we are animals. Everyone does some kind of mating call. Not to say that, like, all women wear makeup to get a man or to, attract a partner or anything like that, or that women don't wear makeup for any other reasons. But, like, women wear makeup to be more attracted, to attract certain people. Men work out to partly for themselves, like, women wear makeup partly for themselves, but also to get buff and to become attractive towards other people. Like, we all do things that probably, align with who we are and what we want for ourselves, but also to attract people that we are attracted to. Like, we all have these mating calls. It isn't something that is, like, people act like gay people are so, like, strange, like they're a completely different species or something, and it's so gross and like imperialistic in some ways. Yeah, I don't even care if like I'm not even if there's like a better word for that, but it's like that like weird sense of like hierarchy. Um, so yeah, and those are just like some of the weird responses that are like labeled positive. But then you get like the really negative response, which is like violent and involves bigotry, possibly involves like physical violence, which is always terrifying and always like a huge possibility. Fortunately, I've not really experienced that kind of negative reaction from coming out yet, but like you never know. I live in the South, so those kind of negative ideas of the LGBT community are very prevalent. So it's like a ticking time bomb, really, which is scary. And that kind of leads me to the next thing I want to talk about, which is coming out is not just one moment in a person's life. Um, I came out to my friends in high school. I came out to really my entire grade at that point, um, which was not necessarily something that was like a mindful action of mine, but like I told like a few people and they told a few people until like finally everyone knew. But I graduated from high school. Um, the friends that I kept from high school obviously still know, but I don't talk to anyone else. No one else is really part of my social circle anymore. I have, however, started a new school. I've started a new job. So all of those people and everyone that I interact with or come in contact with throughout the day, um, they might assume, but no one really knows. And I do have to come out again to those people. Um, if you know anyone long enough, chances are you're going to have to come out to them. They're going to have to find out at some point, which is scary. It is always scary meeting someone new and having to share this very private information with them. On one hand, it's scary because um, it sometimes it can lead from someone treating you like a human being to someone treating you like a gay person. I talked about my friend's boyfriend, and how if he hadn't had known before meeting me, like what my sexuality was, he probably would have acted differently towards me. Like he wouldn't have been so forcefully, politically correct around me. He wouldn't have objectified me like he did. Things like that. And it's the same thing with other people. Sometimes you'll be talking to someone, they'll act completely normally towards you. And then you'll mention, what your sexuality is, how you identify, with your gender, things like that. And they'll do a complete 180 and be completely different towards you, which it might not be actively negative, but it's kind of disheartening when you want to just be treated like a human being, um, like every other straight person is treated. On the other hand, it could also be really scary because, like I said before, they could react violently towards you, especially in a workplace environment. I have no clue how positive the people above me at my job react to, or positively, how positively they react to, LGBT issues. They could be extremely negative towards it. That's my livelihood. So they might not react with physical violence towards me, but in other types of violence, they can definitely react that way. They could fire me, whatever, and I could lose out on money. My parents don't know that I'm gay, and I don't know if or when I'll ever tell them. But like that's a scary situation. I'm still really young. My future is still really shaky. I'm transferring to a bigger school this coming up year. I'm moving out into a house with a couple of people who I don't know, who I'm also going to have to come out to probably at some point. And going to a school that is like incredibly expensive that I've saved my money up for, but I have no clue how long that money will stretch. I have no clue what my job is going to be, if I'll be paid the same amount, if I'll be able to hold on to it. They might cut back or whatever. Like my whole future right now is really shaky, partly because, everyone's future is shaky, but also partly because I'm young and I'm still growing up and, trying to gain some stability in the world. If anything should happen where I can't survive for some reason, I need to like move back home for a little while, my sexuality could jeopardize that. My father, I think I mentioned, is incredibly religious, incredibly conservative. He's gone to school to become a minister. He has very strict ideas about, like what sin is. And I'm not completely confident that if I told him, who I was, he would accept me with open arms. Um, my mom, I'm a little bit more certain that she would react not quite as negatively, but there would still be a shift in our relationship. It would be different, and I don't know 100% whether or not she would invite me back, if I needed help. So it's scary, and it reinforces, what I'm trying to tell you, which is that coming out is not just a one-time thing. It's a process. It's a continuing process. It recurs in each person's life if they have to come out. And I mean, every time that you move, every time you change jobs, every time you go to different schools, if you're meeting new people, you have to come out eventually if you know them long enough, or someone else could come out for you, really. And it changes the entire dynamic in that relationship. So these are just some things to think about when coming out. I'm just going to dovetail. It's going to be a long video. I don't even care anymore. But it's kind of like how, we've legalized gay marriage now, or marriage equality, rather. And everyone's, like, getting really excited about it. I see a lot of straight people changing their profile pics on Facebook to, like, rainbow profile pics. And, it's great. But there's a part of me that it feels kind of terrified by this, historical moment. Because I can see very clearly the same people who are celebrating now becoming complacent because they don't fully grasp the gravity of each person within the LGBT community's situation, which is, sorry, I have something on my nose. There we go. Which is always dire. All of our situations are dire. Personally, I come from a place that is relatively privileged. My family is more lower middle class, but I'm not on the streets. I don't have to beg. I don't have to go into sex work to survive, which is a lot of people in the LGBT community do, which is understandable, but it's a very dangerous line of work. And a lot of LGBT people end up dead or unhealthy, malnourished because of this. And it has to deal with, parents kicking their kids out when they're young and they have no means of survival. It has to deal with certain places not hiring LGBT individuals. It has to deal with both of those, which leads to, financial duress, which leads to desperate measures, which leads to sex work, which leads to drug dealing, which leads to being jailed, which leads to, like, all sorts of different things that are very prevalent in our community. And these things are going to continue to happen whether or not gay marriage is legalized. And I wish that was something that people would realize when they're celebrating and would talk about. Because it's not enough to just legalize marriage equality. It's about legalizing ourselves and within our community. It's about a continuing support of us, a continuing attempt at understanding where we're coming from and the situations that we find ourselves in and the hardships that we have to deal with. So yeah, I mean, it's not so black and white. It's not this. It's like the way that people react to marriage equality is the same way that people react to someone coming out. It's like this big celebration, but then they immediately forget about like why this moment is such a huge moment. Yeah, it's great for the individual who's coming out. Yeah, it's great for the individuals who are gay or bi or whatever sexual identity they have. It's great for them that now marriage equality is in existence here in the West. But we have to think about like the events that led up to this great occasion. We have to think about the things that are continuing to happen, under our noses within our own society, and then think from a less U.S. centric view to other countries who are experiencing like middle age levels worth of oppression and bigotry. There are people who aren't even thinking about marriage equality, but just how to survive because their government is like actively trying to kill them because of how they identify. Like there are still more issues in the world that we have to attack and get rid of if we're ever going to come to a place where we are living happily and peacefully. So yeah, I mean that's really all I had to say. Thank you guys for listening to me, and like I said, please check out Kat Black's videos because she is like so super smart and just rad. So yeah, thanks for listening to me. Have a good night.